Thank you for taking the time to watch this short presentation, and perhaps you are sat there with many questions wanting to understand or come to terms with the expectations of homework. But without a doubt, the question on most of your minds will be, is there any point? Now, hopefully, I'm going to be able to share with you over the next few minutes evidence to demonstrate that yes, there is, and rather than asking the question, is there any point, I throw it back at you with the question, how do we support our students, your children, to strive towards their most fullest potential and aspirational goals? Okay, now it would seem odd to start this presentation with a summary. However, you will see how the dots all connect up. But if we know the finish of what we want, then we can understand more simply the why and the how. Now here at Arbor, we know and understand that the impact of carefully planned homework is essential to maximizing pupils' potential. It maximizes their learning opportunities and for their overall support in raising attainment and achievements as a student. And how does it do this? Why should we be encouraging students to undertake homework? And can we work together to reach the end result, which ultimately is your children's, our students' success? Research studies have shown that there are many positives to the setting of homework in developing our students of today for the adults of tomorrow. And in light of the recent changes over the past 12 months or so, we have seen the need for personal skills and attributes that support our students to adapt to an ever-changing environment around them. There are four key points to address in transferable skills that are enabling our students to access learning independently at a higher level. Far too often in today's climate, we're used to seeking out the answers for everyday problems immediately by the touch of a button using technologies and resources that we have. However, homework encourages students to be more self-reliant, self-disciplined. It allows them to be seeking the confidence in themselves, source out solutions and answers without immediate reference to teachers giving them the answers when they're in lessons. It helps to improve their study habits. Now, if students can find encouragement from using the new knowledge they've learned in school, take it back home and independently learn with that, the desired impact of this is that when they return back to school as a cycle, it is more confident and inviting their attitude is towards the development of their learning further, and it helps build upon the progress of each individual lesson to create a catalogue of learning throughout. Now, being able to manage your learning at your own pace and venture has shown a development to encourage inquisitiveness and enthusiasm to learn and develop links with outside of the tasks set by the school environment. It might be that when they have found that interest in their learning and they wish to progress it further, or they found an interest in a specific topic, homework allows them to elaborate into that and to investigate into that. And those are skills of inquisitiveness and problem solving that they need to develop independently outside of school, or to build upon the skills that they've learned in school. This in turn would produce and transform them into a more broad outlook on knowledge and self-study, and allows them to be more confident. The biggest complaint with homework is a matter of time. A lot of students come back with the common excuse of, I didn't have time, I ran out of time, I couldn't quite complete it, or didn't have time last night, even though it was set last week. Ultimately this beats the classic, oh, my dog ate it. However, underlying all of this, homework supports the students to learn from their mistakes, experiences, and successes to how they plan their time for work around their own lives and personal lives, as it would be if they were in school or in employment at a later date outside in the larger world, in the great world. Now, the early development of self-management is important, and I hope you will agree, will enhance their abilities to plan for their future and map out tasks as and when they've required it, to be able to catalog what they need, when they need it, by when. The triangle of contact between school, student, and home needs to be transparent, supportive, opening the channels for accurate and clear, concise communication back and forth. Homework is a visible and accurate measure of this progress and understanding. Ultimately, it gives us 5 key areas to focus on in terms of how it supports the students in their learning. It reinforces the skills and concepts of the information learned in class. Now, skills and knowledge learned in class must be retained frequently and to a level of challenge that supports the depth of understanding for each individual student. This in turn prepares students for up and coming class topics by being able to join the prior learning and new learnt knowledge together, so that it can be built upon each lesson thereafter. Is sort of constructing a foundation of knowledge and building blocks, as it were, to lean forward and to develop their learning upon. Now, ultimately, homework at home requires the students to develop some research skills. Now, it helps students to develop those key skills that they'll use throughout their lives, such as accountability, autonomy, discipline, time management, self-direction, critical thinking, and independent problem solving. These are all built into the characteristics of a focused and determined individual that most employees would be looking forward in their successive application to a student or to any further adult. Now, allowing parents to have an active role, the importance of parents helping with homework is invaluable and has been proven in many aspects of research done over the last few years. Parental involvement with homework helps develop students' self-confidence and motivation for the classroom. Parents helping students with homework has a multitude of benefits, including things like individual time with the children, enlightening any strengths, interests, or weaknesses that relationship may have, making learning more meaningful, and having higher aspirations. Being led and encouraged by their parents is the most optimum and highest outcome that we would want to achieve. One of the most important reasons for parental involvement is that it helps alleviate stress and anxiety. The students know that they're facing these challenges not alone, and with someone that's close that they respect and respond to with specific skills on those topics. Now, this allows for the channels of communication to be drawn upon. So if indeed in lessons the students seem to be developing an element of stress and anxiety with a specific subject or a specific task, it might not become so apparent to the teacher at that time. However, going home and trying to continue with that learning, that opportunity to be able to discuss in trust to an adult, a parent back at home, would allow that communication to be bridged and to be supported in inevitably developing the student to take their learning forward. So a bit of teacher talk, a bit of deeper knowledge here. However, there is a reasoning behind it. So please just bear with me with what I'm about to share with you. It will make sense, I promise. In the 1800s, there was a gentleman named Erman Ebbinghaus, who was a German psychologist, and his research pioneered the experimental study of memory. And he is known for his discovery of something called the forgetting curve. And this is becoming and has become a pioneering venture on teaching and being able to support with children developing their knowledge and foundation of learning. He addressed a few key points. His research focused on remembering and forgetting knowledge undertaking and highlights that if we learn something new but then make no attempt to relearn the information, we remember less and less of it as the hours, days go by. And as you can see by the graph, it demonstrates that from 100% of the knowledge being taken in within a very short span of time, ultimately a significant part of that can be lost. And if we do not retrieve that information and retain it and constantly link into our learning with that, then ultimately, as we progress through our educational careers, that information is lost or forgotten. And as previous PowerPoints have demonstrated, that it's about consolidation and remembering the information learned in lessons, not learning something new. That's the whole point of homework here. Now, the biggest drop in retention happens almost directly after the lesson or the learning has taken place. And this is reflected in this graph, as you can see, by the steep fall at the start of the forgetting curve, right at the start here on the left-hand side of the slide. Without reviewing or reinforcing our learning, our ability to retain that information plummets drastically. For example, you may leave a lesson or a meeting, indeed this presentation, with your head full of information and new facts and figures, only to find that when you sit down later to try and remember some of it, you may find that there's very little of it that you can remember, or you'll be able to jot down with the key factor information just only a few hours later. And this is the same with homework in regards to the students. If they learn something key and new in lessons during the day, when they get home to retain that information and use that newfound knowledge in their homework, they will at times struggle to remember everything they've learned. However, that is only in a short space of time of less than a day. If we don't review it on a regular basis throughout homeworks, then ultimately there is a bigger gap and a more digressing aspect of homework and knowledge that will be lost. Now, it's easier to remember things that have meaning. Things with little or no meaning link most closely to this forgetting curve. Now, if you have no interest in something, ultimately you're going to really struggle to remember any of it. So for instance, if you're listening to a talk, as I said, on a subject that you don't really understand or have very little interest in, then the likelihood is that you're going to forget that faster than if it were a subject that you're passionate about or have an interest in, that you found really engaging or exciting, or you have a good relationship with the lessons and the content being taught. The way something is presented affects learning. Now, that's not just from us as a teacher, it's also from the students in the submission of their work. Now, the same set of information can be made more or less memorable depending on how well it's communicated. You'll likely find it easier to remember something that's been organized, logical, presented clearly, looks neat, tidy, and has a use of various images or colors. But you may find that the scribbled down shopping list or the scribbled last minutes of paper with the homework on that you've done 5 minutes before it's meant to be handed in is the one that you will forget the most. So therefore, presentation and time management of that work, giving yourself time to create high quality piece of work or to really go into the depth and knowledge of the work that's being set, rather than a last minute 5-minute revision before a test, for example. And ultimately, the biggest impact on homework and learning is the mindfulness and the way that we feel, and how we feel that affects it. Now, psychologically, factors such as stress and sleep play a significant part in how well we retain information. Many people will experience this vicious cycle, especially in recent days, that they feel stressed, which makes it harder to remember, and then ultimately creates a more stressful environment, and you get more stress for the fact that you can't remember it. There's also strong evidence to suggest that sleep can have a massive impact, and it helps our brains to sort out and store the information, catalog it, file it away for a later date. So ultimately there's that need, that strong importance to get that fine balance between work, play and rest for the optimum output. It's about them being able to satisfy personal interests, development of learning, and then rest for mindfulness and development at a more secure and supportive aspect of their learning later on. And homework plays a key part in that. It's really important that homework is used as a tool to deliver a clearer message, to allow them to reduce the stress levels, to remember the information, but also to get a balance between learning and life. And that's why, as some of the homeworks that as previously sent in presentations will be restricted to a capacity or an expectation of 20 minutes. 20 minutes of learning, reflecting, and then a break. 20 minutes of learning and reflection and a break, and then ultimately that cycle of less stress and anxiety takes its course. So, as we've discussed and mentioned, homework is not just about producing new work or learning new knowledge and information. It's about consolidating and retrieving the information learned in school that day to retain that new knowledge and support the students, sort of developing a brickwork foundation of knowledge so they can build upon it as they progress. And as the graph previously showed, we find ourselves forgetting that information that we've just learned. So therefore it's important to prevent us struggling moving forward, that we get a great foundation of knowledge and retrieval of that knowledge in place, ready for moving forward and coming back into school. Now, moving on through middle school and indeed upwards, it's important to understand how homework plays its part. Now, along this journey, the students are at Arbor and indeed their educational careers. Ultimately, we're trying to gear them up ready for the real world, to prepare them for exams, qualifications, accountability and recognition. And homework plays its part in supporting students develop into those successful independent people that we're after. If they can learn to be self-sufficient, independent and regulate processes at home and without the rigorous structures of timetables that they're provided from us on a school day-to-day basis, then as they grow up they will become more familiar with successful strategies and systems that work for them as an individual, and indeed their learning habits, what works for them, their interests and so on. It will support them in setting their own goals, managing their time effectively and remaining focused for periods of time, long or short in duration, with goals of short nature to a long-term focus and target. Now, if we succeed in developing these attributes and we support the students with their attributes, habits and skills, we will be able to evidence the Arbor students, your children, are motivated to learn and achieve their full potential by the time they leave. So all in all, I hope I've been able to demonstrate that homework plays its part, not just in cementing the learning skills of knowledge that they've taken subject by subject in terms of content, but ultimately it also supports them in being able to have those transferable skills, the attributes that gear them up for the wider world. And especially as we go into examination times in year 10 and upwards, 11, 12, 13, when they're looking at courseworks, exams, revision, this plays a significant part in them being able to have these skills. And those skills, like a language, need to be learnt now. You can't be expected to go into another country and be able to speak the language fluently if you haven't put the work and the effort into learning it before we get there. So I hope that makes sense. That's me done. Thank you very much for your time and support as always. Stay safe and look forward to hearing from you in the weeks ahead for Parents' Evening. And perhaps if you have any questions in light of the homework seminars that you've been given, there's a Q&A seminar next week for any questions that we can answer. In the meantime, take care, stay safe.